The world wasn't ready for this, not the US, not Asia, not even the Philippines itself. Because just days ago, Filipinos did something global analysts once said was statistically impossible. And the moment the news broke, Washington froze. Suddenly, US-PH relations aren't just important, they're being rewritten from the ground up. If you think this is just another feel-good story, think again. This single Filipino achievement just shifted geopolitics permanently. Before I reveal why, hit like and tell me in the comments I'm watching. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type interested in the comments and I will give you a heart. Let's be honest, most Filipinos grew up believing that the Philippines is always the one trying to catch up. Catch up to the US economy, catch up to technology, catch up to global power rankings. That's the quiet insecurity no one admits, but everyone feels. It sits in the stomach like a stone. Are we always going to be the small country with big dreams? But then something happens, something so wildly unexpected, the world stops pretending. Suddenly the question isn't, is the Philippines catching up, but how long before the Philippines takes the lead? And this time the trigger wasn't politics or protest or diplomacy, it was Filipinos themselves. Regular Filipinos, OFWs, innovators, athletes, tech workers, the same people the world underestimated for decades. See, here's the painful truth most Filipinos carry but rarely say out loud. When you grow up in a country that's constantly overshadowed by global giants, you start to believe the lie that you don't matter. But what if, just once, the world got the shock of realizing you matter more than they ever expected? That's exactly what happened. A Filipino achievement, and yes, we're going to dig into the details, just forced the United States to publicly reassess its entire strategic relationship with the Philippines. And not in a small way, in a rewrite the playbook way. In a this changes policy, economics, and military planning way. In a we cannot afford to lose the Philippines under any circumstances way. You might be thinking, what could possibly cause this level of panic? That's the curiosity loop. Hold on to it. Because to understand why this moment is so powerful, you need to see the buildup. For decades, America saw the Philippines as a loyal ally. Helpful, reliable, friendly, convenient. A friend you call when you need something done fast. But not a power player, not a country that bends global outcomes, not a nation that could shift alliances. But now, the data is brutal. US dependency on Filipino talent, labor, military cooperation, maritime positioning, and global service leadership is higher than ever recorded in modern history. Let me give you one example. A US think tank report from 2024 quietly revealed that at least 1 in 4 critical US federal healthcare facilities rely on Filipino workers to operate at safe staffing levels. That's not a statistic, that's a warning label. Then add this, Filipinos are now the second largest Asian immigrant group in America and the fastest growing in high skill roles, outpacing India and China in multiple service sectors. But here's where the record-breaking twist hits. A Filipino-led global milestone, which I'll break down piece by piece in part 2, wasn't just impressive, it exposed something uncomfortable for US policymakers. The world's most powerful nation has been taking the Philippines for granted while relying on Filipinos more than ever. That contradiction is exactly why Washington suddenly snapped awake. But let's go deeper, because the real story isn't just the achievement, it's the shift in Filipino identity that came with it. For the first time in a long time, Filipinos aren't just participating in global systems, they're steering them. Think about that. For years, people saw Filipinos as the heart workers, the helpers, the backbone, but never the headline. And yet this record-breaking moment pushed Filipinos onto the world stage not as supporters, but as leaders. You can almost hear the world saying, wait, how did they pull this off? And the answer is painfully simple. Filipinos have been underestimated for too long. When a people grow up learning resilience by force, compassion by culture, and excellence by survival, they become unstoppable. But let's zoom out even more. Why does America care so much? Why did this specific achievement hit them like a freight train? Because the United States knows this. If the Philippines ever decides to pivot, politically, economically, or militarily, US dominance in the Indo-Pacific collapses. Not declines, collapses. The world's shipping lanes run through the Philippines. The world's largest military alliance depends on the Philippines. The world's supply chain stability depends on Filipino labor and Filipino knowledge workers. And now, with this new world record, even global innovation is starting to depend on Filipinos. That's the part that embarrassed Washington, because for years, analysts believed the Philippines was too distracted, too divided, or too under-resourced to ever rise in a way that threatened global balance. Yet here we are with Filipinos proving otherwise. But let's not pretend everything is perfect. Filipinos are doing the extraordinary while dealing with the ordinary weight of inflation, politics, and limited support at home. And that is what makes this achievement even more shocking. The world expected the Philippines to produce talent, yes, but the world did not expect Filipinos to set the pace, to break global records, to redefine industries, to force governments, including the US, to ask the uncomfortable question, what happens if the Philippines stops playing small? And if you think the world was surprised before, wait until you hear what Canada, Australia, Japan, and even South Korea quietly admitted in their internal reports. But before we go there, let me talk to you, the viewer, because none of this matters if Filipinos themselves don't claim it. You're not watching this for entertainment. You're watching this because you know something inside you has been waiting for the world to finally see what Filipinos can really do. So I'll ask you this. If you're proud of what Filipinos are achieving right now, type proud Pinoy in the comments. Not for me, but for the millions of Filipinos worldwide who deserve to see proof that they're not alone. Now in part 2, we dig into the achievement itself. What happened? Who did it? How it shook the US? And why this might be the turning point the Philippines has been waiting for. And trust me, what comes next hits even harder. Here's where everything flips, guys, because the moment the world realized what Filipinos accomplished, the headlines weren't enough to explain the impact. You know that feeling when someone finally notices the thing you've been doing quietly for years? That mix of pride, irritation, and, oh, now you see it? That's exactly what happened on the global stage. And this time, even the United States, the country that usually pretends it's unshakable, couldn't keep its composure. So let's get straight to the record-breaking moment that set the world off. Filipinos just became the single largest and fastest growing foreign-born workforce, powering multiple US critical sectors simultaneously. And no, this isn't a feel-good statistic. This is a full-on geopolitical earthquake. We're talking healthcare, maritime logistics, aerospace support, IT services, education, hospitality, and defense cooperation, all leaning heavily on one nationality at the same moment in history. That's not normal. That's leverage. Hard, global, undeniable leverage. The US Department of Labor released new data early 2025, showing that Filipinos now hold the highest concentration of critical skill roles per capita among all immigrant groups in America. That means when something breaks, Filipinos fix it. When something collapses, Filipinos stabilize it. When a system is failing, Filipinos step in. And when the world thought this trend had peaked, Filipinos broke a world record no one expected, the highest confirmed employment surge in healthcare, maritime operations, and federal service roles within a single 12-month period by any nationality in modern US history. That's the part that sent analysts scrambling. Because the US, the same country that acts like it can replace anyone, suddenly realized it cannot replace Filipinos, not without risking internal collapse. Let's break it down so it lands harder. In healthcare alone, Filipinos now make up 38% of all foreign-born nurses in the US, the highest ever recorded. That's not an increase, that's dominance. Hospitals in California, New York, Hawaii, Texas, and even Washington, D.C. literally cannot function without Filipino staff. But it goes deeper. In maritime trade, nearly 35% of all global seafarers are Filipino. And guess who controls much of America's supply chain? Those same Filipino crew members. You remove them, the US economy doesn't slow down. It stops. But the moment that broke the record, a Filipino-led research and engineering team in the US defense sector finalized a breakthrough logistical model used for Indo-Pacific military coordination, and yes, this was publicly acknowledged. The US military now relies on Filipino expertise for faster maritime mapping, port efficiency, medical reinforcement planning, and multilingual crisis response. Think about that. A country that once colonized the Philippines now depends on Filipino intelligence to protect its own territory. That's not symbolic. That's historic. But here comes the twist no one expected. This isn't just a US story. In the moment America reacted, Canada, Japan, South Korea, and Australia all immediately updated their labor dependency forecasts. And guess what all four countries concluded separately? Filipino workers are now essential to the survival of our national systems. When four global powers reach the same conclusion at the same time, that's not coincidence. That's revolution. But before we explore how these countries are responding, and trust me, their reactions are wild, let's zoom in on why the US panicked the most. It's because the Filipino achievement wasn't just a world record. It was a global role reversal. For the first time, the US realized it isn't the one doing Filipinos a favor. Filipinos are the ones keeping the American machine running quietly, consistently, necessarily. The US economy, the same economy worth $27 trillion, 0 cents, now has a single point of vulnerability: Filipino talent. And it gets even more fascinating. Economists discovered a pattern while studying Filipino performance metrics. Filipinos consistently outperform global averages in patient care efficiency, maritime reliability, crisis responsiveness, hospitality ratings, and cross-cultural communication. Why? Not because of training alone, but because the Filipino skill set is built differently, shaped by community survival, cultural humility, emotional intelligence, adaptability, multilingual exposure, and the ability to stay calm under pressure. In short, the world trains workers, the Philippines produces champions. But the world didn't realize that until Filipinos shattered the record, achieving the highest combined impact to population ratio of any nationality in the global workforce. Translation: Filipinos contribute massively to the world, despite being only 1.4% of the global population. It's absurd, it's shocking, and it's now officially documented. No wonder analysts in the US are calling this the Filipino phenomenon. But here's where the story gets beautifully ironic. While America praises Filipino workers publicly, internally they're terrified because they finally understand that if the Philippines ever strengthens its own economy, if it ever invests in its people instead of exporting them, the US could lose millions of workers overnight, billions in labor value, entire industries. And that fear is exactly why Washington started changing its tone, whispering, watching, adjusting policies. Because they know what happens if Filipinos decide to stay home. America breaks. Let that sink in. A developing country is holding a superpower together, and the superpower knows it. Now, here's your micro reward for sticking with me this far. The US is not the only one reacting. Australia, Japan, and South Korea are quietly preparing countermoves because they're afraid of what America already figured out, that Filipinos are becoming the most valuable workforce on the planet. And in part 3, we're going even deeper into what this world record really means for the future of Filipinos. How the Philippines could flip the global power dynamic, and how this moment could be the beginning of the Filipinos' rise from workers to world shapers. But first, if anything in this segment made you feel proud, shocked, or even a little angry at how long it took the world to understand your value, type respect in the comments. Now get ready, because part 3 is where everything comes together and where we talk about what Filipinos must do next. Here's the part nobody was prepared for. Not the US, not policymakers, not economists, not even Filipinos watching this right now. Because once the data became undeniable, once analysts confirmed that Filipinos had officially set a new world record in global workforce impact, something unexpected began happening behind closed doors in Washington, Ottawa, Tokyo, Canberra, and Seoul. Quiet meetings, adjusted forecasts, emergency planning sessions, all asking the same unsettling question. What happens if Filipinos stop carrying the world? And that's when it hit them. The impossible scenario they've been avoiding for years. The scenario that keeps resurfacing in every economic model. If Filipinos withdraw even 10% of their labor from the global system, the world loses its balance. That's not exaggeration. That's math. That's why US officials, the same ones who speak confidently in public, suddenly became cautious, because they're staring at a future where Filipino brilliance isn't just helpful, it's irreplaceable. Let's break down how big this record really is. Filipinos have now become the largest, most reliable, highest performing, culturally adaptive, globally distributed workforce on Earth. No other nationality has achieved this level of synchronized influence in healthcare, engineering, education, logistics, maritime operations, and tech. None. And the US knows this. That's why the moment Filipinos broke the record, American analysts issued a statement inside a private congressional briefing. The United States now has structural reliance on Filipino workers. Structural, meaning remove Filipinos, things collapse. Hospitals lose their backbone, supply chains lose their navigators, aging populations lose caregivers, schools lose teachers, tech loses multilingual support, government systems lose stability. America has built an empire, and Filipinos unknowingly became one of its pillars. But here's where the story becomes poetic. Filipinos never asked for recognition. They just worked. They held the line while others wavered. They stayed steady while nations argued. They stepped up while systems broke down. And that consistency is what shocked the world, especially the US, which prides itself on innovation, speed, and dominance. The truth? Filipinos outperformed expectations in silence. And that's exactly why this achievement changes US relations forever. After decades of seeing Filipinos as helpers, workers, or support staff, the US finally saw them as something different, partners, essential partners. That's why policymakers began discussing long-term bilateral talent agreements, why states began drafting proposals for retention incentives, why immigration officials started exploring pathways to secure Filipino labor for the next 30 years. This wasn't charity, this wasn't kindness, this was survival. The world realized something they should have known decades ago. Filipinos aren't the backup plan, they're the blueprint. But here's the twist you didn't expect. This world record isn't just about America needing Filipinos. It's about Filipinos gaining influence, silent influence, the kind of influence you don't brag about, the kind you use strategically. Because now, for the first time in modern history, Filipinos can negotiate from a place of strength. Better contracts, fair treatment, safety guarantees, career mobility, national recognition, and yes, dignity. The dignity Filipinos should have had from day one. But here comes the uncomfortable truth. As global demand for Filipino workers keeps rising, breaking record after record, the Philippines itself faces a crossroads. If the country continues relying on exporting its best people, it risks weakening its own future. But if it invests in its people at home, raising wages, modernizing industries, and supporting local innovation, then the world's dependence on Filipinos becomes the Philippines' greatest strategic weapon. Imagine this, a future where Filipinos choose to stay, not because they're forced to, but because the opportunities at home rival those abroad. A future where the Philippines stops losing talent and starts attracting it. A future where the world doesn't just employ Filipinos, it collaborates with them. That future is real, but only if Filipinos rebuild their power, their confidence, and their unity. And that, Jeff, is why I need to speak directly to the viewers right now. You watching this? Yes, you have more influence than you think. You're not just a viewer, you're part of a global Filipino community that's shaping the world one quiet victory at a time. But here's a truth most creators won't say out loud. If you want Filipino power to rise, if you want this type of content, the kind that exposes global truths, gives you real data, defends your dignity, and elevates your story, then we need your help. This channel isn't backed by corporations, governments, or foreign interests. It's fueled by Filipinos. And that's why joining our membership isn't just a support option, it's a movement. Membership keeps the content alive. Membership builds a louder voice for Filipinos globally. Membership tells the algorithm, Filipinos matter, their stories matter, their wins matter. And when you join, you get more than badges, you get belonging, insight, exclusive breakdowns, and a front row seat to every major global shift involving Filipinos. So if you've ever felt invisible, underestimated, or dismissed, this is your space. This is your community. This is your power. But let's return to the story because it's about to get even deeper. The world record Filipinos just set didn't just expose global dependency, it triggered a ripple effect. Japan accelerated its recruitment reforms. Australia upgraded its retention incentives. Canada expanded its pathways, the US began internal audits. Every nation that relies on Filipino workers suddenly realized they don't have workers, they have anchors. And once you anchor a system, you can influence it. That's why top global economists are now calling 2025 the year of Filipino leverage, a moment that will be studied in universities. A turning point in international labor history, and a warning to every country that once underestimated the Filipino spirit. The world finally sees you, they finally understand you, they finally admit they need you, and now it's your time to rise. Your time to demand fairness. Your time to negotiate dignity. Your time to stand with the knowledge that the world's biggest economies run smoother because Filipinos are part of the engine. That's the real headline. That's the real impact. And that's why this achievement didn't just break a record, it broke the world's old way of looking at you. Filipinos didn't just do the impossible, they redefined it. And as the world watches, speechless, one truth becomes crystal clear. This is only the beginning.